Well, hello everyone. It's RPGs with DBJ. Today is Future Friday. Ooh, about to make a mistake. And I have with me a co-host, Vincent, and we will talk about all things RPG related for Starships, and of course involving his specific cipher system setting, Astrositas. So, Vince, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself and what it is that you do.
Hello, I'm Vincent Shine. I'm a GM and I'm also writing a lot of RPG related stuff. I did it since the time I started, so it's nothing new for me. I started writing, I think, prestige classes for D&D 3.5, stuff like that. And currently I have written a pretty long and complex system for the cipher system, which I call Astrositas. I also like your pronunciation, by the way, DBJ. Sounds way more exotic. Yeah, and it's mainly about starships. That's why I thought it would be a great idea starting to talk about starships. I'm actually curious, DBJ. Have you played a lot of RPGs which involved starships and starship exploration and combat and stuff like that? Because it's not that common, I think, to focus on that.
No, I haven't. There's an old, I guess it would be considered a miniatures game or a board game called Silent Death that I used to play quite a bit of, and it has a great background to it, but it was more of a miniatures game, and it had starships, and we had a big battle map and it had some background to it because my friends and we would role play our board games and miniatures games anyway. I mean, that's kind of like our default. I mean, we would have fun. It was very much beer and chips, but we would get into the role of if we were in charge of moving these figures around, or starships, or governments, or anything like that. So we defaulted to that. But as far as a game that had specific starship rules, maybe the original Weston Games D6 Star Wars.
Yeah, I also got that.
Yeah, and that was the last one. I've played other games that had vehicle rules in them. And that's one of the things I really did want to bring up about starship rules, or maybe in general, more in general, vehicle rules, and using them in RPGs, especially science fiction, when you have we have so many examples of it in terms of media, books and comic books and graphic novels and movies and such, and your spin on it, and then just talk about it in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples on that. To be honest, the most of the vehicle rules I did read so far are pretty technical. I'm not sure. It's always like, hey, you have this vehicle has this kind of hit points and this kind of armor and this kind of weapon, and that's it. And I find it pretty boring if you do it that way. But there are some, I think in Apocalypse World, there are pretty cool vehicle rules where you can do maneuvers and stuff like that, like trying to hit the brakes and whatever. Yeah, there's different rules for catching up to an enemy and trying to jump on their vehicle and whatever you can do, whatever fun things you can do. With Astrositas, I try to focus a bit more on the spaceship itself, so making the spaceship almost like a whole character which the whole group can use. So it has different abilities. You can build a layout for the ship. You can use personal combat and ship combat at the same time. So for example, you could let an enemy invade into the ship and at the same time fight another ship. It's actually encouraged to do stuff like that. And I also try to introduce some elements of FTL. It's a small game you can play. I use it on Steam, and it's basically a crew management game inside a ship where you can just send your crew to different positions to boost different stats. And I tried to capture that a bit for my system too. So you can activate modules, the active ability of modules when you run there. So there's a lot of running through the halls of the ship during combat, which I really liked because it makes stuff more dynamic than just sitting in the cockpit and just, okay, I fired a weapon again.
You know, that's what so Scott Poe mentions, like speed and acceleration, and the only vehicle rules he knew were Shadowrun. And you know, I think one of the issues, I don't want to say it's a problem, but this one is a little hard to crack, and that's the rules for many vehicles, starships and whatnot, don't run parallel to our imagination of how we would use them in a role-playing game. So let me give you an example that if we start using vehicle rules with like acceleration, just acceleration, braking, how tough the vehicle is, some weapons, it's a little bit dead. It's not dynamic enough because our imaginations are, let me go to a world famous starship, which would be the Millennium Falcon. And the Millennium Falcon has to maneuver through asteroid fields, and sometimes it breaks down and you've got to smash on the hull, you know, the dashboard to get the hyperdrive to activate or something. And sometimes there's someone trying to run through the ship to run to a laser cannon to fire at people that are coming after the back of them. And then there's things inside the ship that are getting juggled around and sliding around and such, because there's always a droid getting slid around in the ship. It's those kind of things. I think the organic nature of them that is missing if the rules are hyper specific just for vehicle combat, but the rules for the people interacting has a dynamic tension to it.
Yeah, as I said, I try to combine those two elements as much as possible to really give them players a choice what to do. At first, I started to make it so that you need 3 people to control all aspects of the ship, but then I started realizing that that's too limiting, so I made it so that one person could control the whole ship and the others could help him and give him bonuses. But they could also just run around using modules, fending off enemies, sealing some breaches in the ship, or whatever. And that's what I try to make with my system, so that it's more dynamic than just I will roll attack again and trying to do that. But you can also just focus on the ship and maneuver through meteoroids or whatever you want to do with the ship, because the system itself is not very limiting in what you can do. I also try to make it so that controlling the ship is as intuitive as possible. So you don't need extra training to be able to control the ship. So only the pilot could, for example, use the ship. I assume that in the far future, the ships would be so easy to use because training these guys for years wouldn't be worth it anymore. So they just made it so that every idiot can just get into the cockpit and try to fly this thing, and the ship tries to help him.
Yeah, and the knowledge, the natural or implanted knowledge of the Omega drones probably has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah. There are Omega drones which are focused on controlling the ship, but they are just better at it than the others, and the others can still do it without any problem.
Yeah, and that's another thing. In general, for RPGs in general, the driver or pilot, and this also applies to like Shadowrun or Cyberpunk with like hacking, that sometimes or older rules made it seem like you had to stop the game to let the driver or the pilot or the hacker engage in their own mini game, leaving everybody out. And as
shooting from the back or whatever at best, but that's it.
Yeah, and a lot of times, as again, our imaginations are registering one thing, but the rules are not registering what our imaginations are like. For example, we imagine the hacker plugging into a computer board and trying to type away, and the tenseness of whether the blast doors open up while the PCs are like firing down the hall or something, and someone else is on a comm link saying, yelling at them like, hurry up, we're about to leave and we're being overrun or something. And then, or the pilot like flying a ship, and then their friends are firing out the cockpit door as it gets ready to close in. Oftentimes, older rules, it's like, okay, you guys, the three of you stop, relax, and go get chips. I'm going to deal with this other person who's the pilot. And now mind you, many games have I don't know the rules for it, but I know Star Trek has gone out of their way to have new rules where every member of the party is involved in it. Like you were saying about someone may be piloting, someone may be giving the crew orders, someone else might be firing the weapons, someone else might be using the sensors to enhance the targeting or something. There's always a little bit of, there's something for someone to do on the ship. I mean, as far as manipulating it, or they could leave their positions and then go fight enemies in the hallways or something, or board the other enemy ship or what have you.
You can. I also made it so that you can theoretically get small fighters, something like X-wings or whatever, and fight with them against the other ship. And I also made it so that the other big ship just can't use their normal weapons against these small ships because they're too fast and maneuverable. So you get massive bonuses to dodge attacks from large ships. So they have actually a chance to board the other ship and get in there. They can also try to destroy the small turrets which are on the other ship on the hull, and then try to get in there. I try to implement a lot of stuff. The thing is that a lot of these options are with modules, and modules are usually make it so that you roll them randomly. But you can also have some specific ship abilities which allow you to use these abilities if you don't want to give it up to random chance. So, for example, I have a ship class which is called Carrier, which focuses heavily on creating other things and creating these small ships and drones and probes and whatever. And he can create small squads and of ships you can use and things like that.
Okay, so now is it possible for, say, one player character to control the other ships, and then a secondary player character to manipulate or control the starship that they are already on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sure. You could jump into one of these ships, and the others just follow it around, and the other person just controls the ship. There are also specific character types which can control the ship you are on from outside of the cockpit. So you could also try to jump into the other ship and control your ship from there, and there are lots of possibilities.
Scott Poe says, "How about just good old damage control? Hey, that's on fire. Lock down that mag lock. Get some sealant from that other breach hole.
Yeah, I tried to capture that. Okay. Breaches and fire are basically, there are some weapons which just produce breaches or fire on the other ship. That's their effect.
Yeah, that's a very common starship trope, and I it's not a bad word to have a trope, because it's the kind of thing that we like to see. The hull being exploded and some of the crew being launched out into space, or the fresh-faced sacrificial buddy that gets locked behind a blast door because you've got to close it in enough time to save everyone else, but that one person is still stuck in the room trying to maneuver something, and then a fire
gravity shuts off and suddenly everyone is flying around. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I made specific GM intrusions for each ship core So each ship core has different stuff that could happen inside of combat. So, for example, if you have a ship that breathes suns, then there could suddenly be lava somewhere, or which a room could suddenly heat up or catch on fire, and you can just use it as a GM intrusion. You can just ask the players, "Hey, do you want this to happen?"
That's awesome. I didn't think about the idea of having like a list of GM intrusions that are appropriate to maybe the class of the ship or how it's powered, or like an example, having me being a GM, I would love to just have a few examples or a random list of appropriate GM intrusions.
Yeah, I can give you one if you want.
But
But I have what ship types do we need to want to do? Let's do Breathe the Suns. Page 97 in my document. Breathe the Sun GM intrusion. Certain spots heat up or with fire or steam. Sudden gusts of wind blow them from the ground. The temperature inside rises uncomfortably high. Firebolts rain down or explode nearby, coming from the walls.
see, that's awesome. I love that stuff. I love.
And each ship core has these. So I added them for the GMs as some ideas you can use to mess with your players. And I also, because that's not enough for me, I also made something I called singularities. For the cipher system, you usually try to collect ciphers, which are small devices which you can use one time, something like grenades or one-time boosts. And I didn't want them to be items. I want them to be something like a catched singularity, so something like a ghost you catch with your ghost trap. And these singularities produce some negative effect for the crew while they are active until you catch them. And each singularity is basically a basic sci-fi trope you can just use against your players. I can give you an example also if you want. Give me a number between 1 and 100.
Okay, 67. And Scott Poe, throw a number in there, 1 through 100.
Um, 67. That's rage. One aggressive creature in ship range suddenly gains 2 levels for all combat purposes, but needs to attack constantly everyone near itself.
Oh, so this is it's like an open singularity that the Scott Post is 74. I'll have you describe that, and then I'll get into what I was thinking.
74. Signal creates a portal to another space at the same system that can attract singularities. The portal transmits only sound wave, but both ways, which leads to a voice speaking from somewhere else.
So is this like the singularities are?
It's basically like the plot point of a typical Star Trek episode. You have they fly somewhere, then suddenly something completely unexplainable happens, and they try to solve it to the end of the episode. And I tried to capture most of them. I made 100 different types of these. I have everything from shrinking persons to making an evil doppelganger to whatever you want.
That's awesome, especially if you really want to introduce like technology allows the greater galaxy to be traveled, but there's still a little something people don't know about. Like
that's exactly the point. The ship attracts these singularities to it because it uses it manipulates space and time to transport itself, to fly, and that's why it's the engine of the ship always attracts these small singularities. So we can basically use a GM intrusion to say, I spawn a singularity, a random one. And when the players catch that, they get new ciphers. That's awesome. The trick.
I mean, even in classic Star Trek, the Post says, "What a great way to organically add new story." That's it. Well, of course, he succinctly said something that I was trying to think of. Absolutely, and you could even have a reason or pseudo scientific reason, like every time someone alters time and space, these singularities happen more regularly. So it's not like a weirdness magnet. It's because they are going through time and space and folding it, or
it just increases the probability to happen somewhere, because these things just happen naturally, but they are usually super rare. But near the ship, they are just more common. That's it.
Right. I mean, I think even in quantum mechanics, it's like every possibility is a probability.
Exactly.
So
if you drop your glass and it shatters, there's a small probability that it will just land in your hand and is complete again.
yeah.
That can happen theoretically. It's really, really unlikely, but it can happen.
Exactly. So now when the ship goes through, it's almost like an improbability field.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And what a great way to throw in, like, a GM is stuck for an idea, and they want to throw this in, or the players do one of their, constant player things. You as a GM, you're like, hey, I've got this planet. We're going to have this interaction. I've got this great adventure. And the first thing the players say is, we're leaving. And you're like, oh man, boom, throw in a singularity. And they, okay, well, you travel away and this other thing happens. And now you have another story very quickly, really to throw the players in, and something that might be really far out of field for the players.
Yeah, I once had it. My favorite singularity, I just tell you, it's called Singularity X. It's the 100 on the 100 roll, and X spawns planet X somewhere nearby the ship. It's basically a planet which is drifting through time and space, and whenever you roll the singularity, just the singularity manifested somewhere near the ship. And that's what happened to my players once. They were so confused by it. They just found the singularity, but couldn't connect the singularity to the planet. And then suddenly they put it in and the planet vanished.
Wow. Wow. I love stuff like that. Like if you, it's a way for you to add not just randomness, but to throw different problems at the players.
Yeah, I like to use them in conjunction with something else, because at their own, they're usually not a big deal. Maybe someone is shrink down for a couple of while, it's maybe funny, but that's it. But while you are in combat, if someone suddenly shrinks down, then it's interesting.
And a lot of Star Trek episodes have been like that, where the original encounter is pretty boring, but this third element added to it adds that tension. Hey, we're only here to oversee a diplomatic thing, and everyone knows it's boring, and the two races can't talk to each other, but all of a sudden, like, the crew's overcome with like pheromones and they all become sexually excited or something, or an alien species of galactic intelligence decides to talk to them then and there, and they have to
deal with this without creating diplomatic problems and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing I learned about them. Don't just use them whenever, just use them when something interesting is happening. That's the main thing about them.
Now, you mentioned like boarding other ships and having things happen in the hallways and such. Can you go into detail about that? Because I find that portion of Starship combat is missing a little bit.
Yeah, I tested it a bit, and I think the main problem why you usually don't use it is because ships are usually pretty big, and running around in most systems takes up a lot of time. So if you, for example, wanted to go somewhere down the hall and fight the invaders, but you need 4 turns to do that, you won't do it. And you would just stay in the cockpit and try to fire more, and maybe when all the enemies are away, you try to figure out how to do it. So I basically said that all the ships have some way to speed you up, to get you to the farther parts of the ship faster. For example, conveyor belts on the floor, or some doors which just portal you through the ship or whatever. to encourage the players to just go there and do something. So they can just be there fast, even though in the normal rules it would take like four or five turns to get there. In my system, you need at most, I think, two turns. That's the highest thing you could need if you are rolling really badly. So that's one thing I try to do, and I also try to make it so that most of the enemies and weapons can produce some person scale effects. So I normally distinguish between person scale, which is the normal player scale, and ship scale. So the ships have a different scale they work on. You can theoretically try to fight a ship as a person, but it's much, much stronger. It's 3-1. So as a level 3 ship would be a level 9 enemy for a normal character. And in Cypher, that's really strong. So, yeah.
But not impossible?
Not impossible.
I mean, it's rare. Mind you, it's very rare. But there are times when the human level people have attacked larger mechanical ships, planes, vehicles, what have you. And rarely, but there have been times when they have actually had an effect. You know, I'm trying to think of when this has happened in a starship, and I can't think of an example, but I can think of the trope from movies where an individual standing on the ground.
There is this scene in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 where Drax just drops out of the backside with a cable attached to him and just shoots the other ships. Something like that.
Yes. Quite hilarious. I don't know how many player characters would want to, you know, have their rear end dragged along on a cable out the back of a crashing starship. But fun nonetheless. And yes, that the idea of like you're standing on the ground and the enemy's, you know, coming down in a starship or a helicopter or something, and you're firing at them, and you're just hoping you get that one lucky shot, you know, that'll take it out or something. Rare, but I can see it happening. I can see it.
And I also have a couple of ways, I think 2 or 3 different ways where you can make a player character ship scale for a limited amount of time. So you could basically grow a person to ship scale, and so he can fight a ship himself. So I have, for example, Enigmas. Enigmas are ship scale Cypher, and I have one Enigma which can grow a player character for a couple of turns to ship scale. So he could basically go in and punch the other ship. That's the trick on the thing. So yeah, and I've got also a couple of ships which can as either transform themselves to giant mechs, and the players can control them, or create suits you can use and ship scale.
Ooh,
so
Robotech.
So basically, yeah, exactly, Robotech, something like that.
Or Gundam or something.
Yeah,
at least temporarily.
It's from the core Fabricate Synthetics, and I have one core which is simply called Transforms. And Transforms is normally just he can switch between Scout and Artillery and whatever, but at the highest level he can transform himself into a mech. The complete ship.
That's awesome. I'm sure someone would have a great time, like trying to fly through hyperspace or something, or re-entering a planet's surface, and the other player characters are leaving his chest.
Oh yeah, and then when you're landing, you're doing the superhero landing with the ship.
Deadpool in the background, like, oh, here comes the superhero landing. Watch out for those knees, and just landing in the ground. And, yeah, that sounds awesome, dude.
Yeah, I made a lot of these things which I tried just to make it interesting. I'm not so much concerned about balancing for a lot of these things because they are just limited in scope, and they are either really costly or you can only use them once. So just go out and try to have fun with it. Also, the interesting part about building a spaceship from a design perspective is that there's no other ship you have to balance through it. So you don't have like 4 player characters and one is completely OP and the others are not, because all the players use the same ship. If the ship is too strong, that's not a problem because everyone can use it.
Okay. Okay. It's almost as if just because of the way the mechanics work, um, temporarily each player's powers are suspended because they're all using the same ship. So
Yeah.
there is no power difference. It's, hey, we're going to let this one player use the ship as themselves, and then they just become the starship temporarily. And if they're able to acquire other ciphers to do the same thing, then that power can be shared with someone else when they use it temporarily.
Yeah, the big problem about balancing is usually the balance between the player characters. It's not so much the balancing between the players and the GM, because the GM can always scale up. It's no problem. You can just make more monsters, use stronger monsters or whatever. That's no problem. So if you have a ship, if the GM is confronted with a ship that it's simply too strong in combat, you just use more enemies, you just use more high-level enemies, and that's it. That's no problem. You don't have the problem that one of the players overshines all the others because the ship is used by everyone.
Yes, Scott Poe says exactly what I'm thinking. Like that is some awesome stuff. So let's go into like upgrading Starship,
Yeah.
adding new things, and which abilities are limited to which players for their using the ship. So just give me a little run.
The basic thing is that the ship has 3 attributes which work similarly to that what the players use. You've got structure. Structure is basically the equivalent to might for the characters. So might is strength and constitution for characters. And for the ship, it's using ship weapons and modifying the structure of the ship, the hull, or the inside of the ship a little bit. So you could, for example, roll structure to withstand high gravity or withstand a cosmic storm or whatever. That's basically the constitution part, and you can use it to fire your weapons. That's structure. That's one station you can use. So for example, if you got 3 players, you could each of them could use one of these stations, or one uses all of them and the others just support him in different aspects. So you could switch up. So for example, one is on the tactic station, one of the structure station, and one is on the engine station. Engine is the next one. Engine is speed. It's for initiative and movement, but also energy production. So if you have abilities which use up a lot of energy, it's usually engine points you use for them. And you can also use it to move objects in near the ship. So something like the tractor beam. And to manipulate gravity inside the ship. So you could, for example, if you are in the engine station, instead of moving, say, oh, there are intruders in this and this slot inside the ship. I just increase the gravity there so they can't move as fast to the others instead of moving the ship. That's the same action. And the last is a tactic station, which is intellect. So it's communication and sensors, basically, and special abilities of a lot of special abilities of the ship. So you could use it to translate languages, to scan other ships, to communicate, and to use your enigmas also from there. That's the 3 stations you use, and they work really intuitively. So if the players want to do something with a station, which it could theoretically do, for example, if you have a player in a structure station and he says he wants to stop these invaders, you could ask, hey, I want to create a wall in front of them, to just morph the ship a bit to move the walls together. He could do that, but it would be pretty hard because it's a very weird effect which you normally wouldn't use, so it would be higher difficulty, but you could use it. And that's basically how the whole controlling the ship works. There's really not much more to it than that. You still have abilities, but the abilities work like the abilities from characters. So you use a couple of points from the ship's pools, and then you can use them. And also the roles are modified by the ship stats and the player's character stats. Okay. So a normal role is modified by the skills of the character, the effort he uses. He needs to use 2 levels of effort to decrease the difficulty by 1 for ships, because otherwise the player character would be too powerful in this instant and he would just use its own effort all the time. And you can use the ship systems, which are ship skills, and you can use overcharge, which is effort for ships. it sounds a bit complicated, but it's basically just you use half of the ship and half of the character, and they both have basically the same stats. You just have to calculate all of them together.
Okay, okay. So you did it, because that was going to be another question, but you already answered it about the player being able to use their own effort to engage something with the ship.
Yeah. The problem is if you just give the player the ability to use their own effort to decrease the difficulty. Normally, a player can use effort, uses points to decrease the difficulty by 1 step, and they can have up to 6 levels of effort. And this would decrease the difficulty by 6. So if, for example, if you have something that is level 10, it would just be 4. So you have to roll above a 12 times 3 again. But if you would use it for the ship, the players would only use their own effort all the time and would never use the points for the ship because the ship has to be repaired and they can just sleep it out, basically. So I made it so that 2 levels of effort equal 1 level of decreased difficulty for the ship if you're controlling the ship.
Okay. Jared says, I love ship combat, pirates on the sea, starships in space, standing on the back of a dragon, fighting a titan. It's all the same. And with those rules, the players may, I'm just making an example, maybe they come to a planet where there are a race of people that are like standing on the back of dragons or something, or even giant individuals that use the ship rules.
Have this race already.
Yeah.
I have a giant race which is just ship scale per default. Their ships are absolutely fucking massive, like moon size, and their normal scout ships are the size of a normal ship. So they could just engage you with their hellbats or whatever and smack your ship if you're going too close.
Yeah, and Jared also says it also feels great when everyone has a role within the ship that is unique to their character archetype. It's a great role-playing hook.
Yeah. You could always be the guy who is in a tactics station scanning ships and giving bonuses here and there and trying to find a weak spot, and the other guy just shoots all the time. But you could also support the other. If, for example, if you have one in the structure station and you just need to fire all your weapons because you can only fire 1 weapon per person, you could just join all together and try to shoot all the ship weapons you have in a single turn.
Yeah, Cypher System has a pretty simple and fluid method of using like effort, because Scott Poe says a great pilot can get more out of a mundane ship and a newbie can do okay in an advanced one. That does help reflect the man and machine relationship.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. If you have a great pilot, you can specialize to being a pilot. There are ways to do that. Then you are much more efficient on the ship, and also if you're using these small ships I mentioned before. So you can focus on that, but you would be much weaker in every other situation. So you have to make a drop off here and there. By the way, these things with the dragons and whatever, I had in my last session of Astrositas, I had a situation where they encountered giant space whales and rammed into one. Then one of the characters used the transporter of the ship, which is basically like a speeder from Star Trek, and speeded on the backside of the space whale to get his buddy, the crystal guy, and speeded back while the other tried to fend off the other space whales, which tried to whack the ship out of the body, and nearly escaped with the stuff we already inside again.
That's awesome. So where or how can the players improve their own starship's abilities?
Yeah. The ship starts out as something like a first level character, and the ship increases his ability somehow. It's up to the players and GM to decide why this is. Maybe the ship is severely damaged and you need special materials to repair it to full functionality, or maybe you improve it all the time with new parts, or maybe it grows, maybe it's organic, you don't know. And each time you do that, you level it up absolutely similar to how you would level up a character. You usually used something I call keys in the system, which work as XP. And I have also made a list of different possible keys for the system. If you want, you can give me a number between 1 and 10, and I can give you an example.
All right, guys, between 1
and
and
20. 1 and 20, sorry.
1 and 20? Okay.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. I'm looking for gotta find the page. That's the demonstration effect. Exploring, person scale, difficult, upgrading the ships, page 33. 6, you said. That's plant a rare plant in the core chamber and help it grow.
Oh, wow. Red dice popped into the oh no. Must be number 3. And Red Dice says he likes the idea of a ship as a character. Makes sense given the importance a group vessel has in a typical RPG. And then of course
number 3 is form a new honest bond between the crewmen. And now I didn't define it any further. So, for example, you have to get new crew members and try to interact with them and try to make friends with them. That improves the ship. However, it does that, but it does. Maybe it feeds through friendship. I'm not sure.
Hey, maybe, I mean, if they're traveling from planet to planet, they can always find like abandoned technology or
that's also one thing you could get. You could also get traveling to a specific place, and the further you get, the better the ship position gets. And you can use this to increase the pools of the ship, to get new abilities for the ship. And whenever you had 4 of these upgrades, you increase the tier of the ship by 1, exactly like the character. So you get new abilities from your core, you get new abilities from your frame, and then you do the stuff all over again until you are tier 6. And each core has 6 tier abilities, and each frame also has 6 tier abilities, and you can pick from them like you would use character abilities in the Cypher system.
Okay. And just to let you know, and the people in the chat, that sometimes there's like I don't know what they're called, robo viral infections or something, where somebody pops in the chat, this this Carlos thing popped in the chat before. I'll try to get rid of it, but I'll see. Usually it requires shutting the chat down and then opening it back up, maybe. But we'll find out. Yeah, those little stupid little bots. I wish they were ciphers. Just spend the point and go away. But yes, yeah, Carlos isn't the legend. Red Dice is. Thanks for joining in, man.
Yeah. Hello, Red Dice. Hello, John.
Yeah.
We know each other.
Yeah, he's a famous luminary in the RPG community, whether he likes to think of himself that way or not. So when there was something on the tip of my tongue. The Cypher system uses the adjective, noun, that verbs.
Exactly.
Right. And which is a very simple but elegant system. So how have you used that to describe building a starship?
Yeah. Basically you have the same 3 elements building the ship. You have a ship class, which is the descriptor, which is basically like an Athena class or Odysseus class. I made them so that they are legends. So it's a bit more flexible, and you can put in different abilities which are under the same focus in there without just using a single adjective. So for example, the Athena class, Athena is not only the goddess of knowledge, but also of war. So you can build in some abilities from both of these aspects. And I just assumed that legends or myth are immortal. So you basically, even if it's called differently, maybe it's not called Athena, maybe it has a different name in the future, but the concept of a fighting intellectual as a god is still alive even in this future time. And so you can use it still in this time. And I made, I think, 15 different of these ship classes. And each of them gives you a small bonus on different stats, small ship systems, and also a module. A module is a ship artifact, which you can use from the inside. It gives a passive bonus whenever you have installed it into your ship, and it also gives an active bonus when you run in there and use it.
Okay, so it's passive when the ship is just I want to say being powered down, but just being itself, it just has a passive ability, whether it makes it tougher or
or gives a bonus regeneration or whatever. And when you actively use it, you can use it as an ability which works similar to artifacts. So you have to roll for depletion, you have to maybe use a couple of points, and then you can use the active ability. For example, the Hermes class class has the sleep inductor, which is also called the staff of Hermes. Hermes? Nah, English pronunciation. It has the passive ability that the room itself can be used as a sick bay, because Hermes is also god of doctors. And the active abilities is that you can put enemies in a certain range around the ship to sleep until they are attacked. So you could, for example, just use it to make an escape or to board the other ship and overwhelm them or whatever.
Now, I'm going to diverge slightly from this. I love the fact that I love mechanical abilities that I myself can describe narratively, as opposed to specific structures and mechanical abilities that are specific to the world, right? Because like you're just describing, okay, you have I have a medical unit, but I could also use that to like knock out my enemies or something. And that could be described in many ways. It could be like maybe the ship has this living organ inside of it that helps the crew, this organ helps the organ, of course, could be from a very large creature or something, but it helps heal the crew. But then that organ can also maybe extrude something out that pacifies the.
What has a scream which puts people to sleep or whatever.
Right.
And I have you can absolutely do that. And I also made it so that the ships are built in a way that the module slots, you have normal slots which you can just build normal rooms in or store stuff, and you have module slots where you can install these modules. And the module slots I described in a way that you can install everything in it. You could put an organ in there, but you could also make a technical station or a crystal or whatever. It just has adapters for everything, just because the future needs to be able to adapt to new situations. Yeah. So you could have one module which is an organ. You can have one module which is maybe a living being which just can't leave the room, or you can have one which is simply a small factory which produces stuff all the time, and it's all in the same ship.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Red Dice says he says normally I'd be at work, but I've got the day off, waiting to go LARPing in the torrential rain.
Yeah, he has LARPing break currently from our sessions.
I don't envy LARPing in the rain. That's just
yeah. I did it a couple of times. I think 1 or 2 times I tried vampire LARPing, but I didn't really get into it, to be honest. Maybe just because of the players I had. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't participate too often, but here in Central Ohio, there's a group called Dago here, and they do like it's not quite LARPing. It's more just it's padded armor, weapons, and fun. But yeah, the costumes and the design and stuff is really awesome. Which is kind of like my thing. I like that creative energy of people designing things, but I wouldn't want to run around in the rain at all.
Nah, it's not my cup of tea. I want to try it someday, doing the real experience in a large camp or whatever. But let's see when the time comes for that.
He says I'm all about that full metal armor running around in the rain. I have a problem. yeah. That's
we
crazy.
We all have.
Yep. All right. So great ability to have, which by the way, I'm extremely surprised that like Monte Cook Games hasn't, and essentially created what you've done already. I mean, it seems like a simple step to do a parody of sorts with making Starship rules in parody with the player characters, and so much so that the Starships are able to act and maneuver in as many different ways dramatically as the player characters. But what about the outside environment, right? We have, as far as star fields and radiation and I don't know, gaseous nebulas or something. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, the environment can be used as an hazard normally, but that's pretty basic stuff. You have to just roll on your either engine or structure to counteract stuff like which happens through these environmental hazards. But you could also do stuff like swimming, getting into the water and using it as a submarine, which just would use up points constantly. I have a ship type which is called terraforms, which has a giant drill attached to the front, so you can dig tunnels with it. I have all kinds of stuff. I already thought about making a ship which motorizes meteorites just because I loved how this sounded. But it didn't make it so far. And I've got all these different environments. I also have an interesting method to hyperlane travel. So if you want to move from one system to the next, I call it dive points. Which is basically like a wormhole from Star Trek. You jump in at one point and get far away out of the other point. But the thing is that the travel between these points is not just laying back and watching the lights go. It's basically like a wild water raft. So you have to maneuver the ship through a tunnel that's between dimensions, and stuff from the other dimensions could grab in. So, for example, you could dodge a giant tentacle trying to grab your ship, or you have to maneuver around whirlpools which produced in the side this stream, or stuff like that. Maybe there are other broken ships parts flying around in there. So it's a pretty intense time until you get out of the other side. I didn't want to make it to travel between these points just waiting. I just wanted to make it interesting, so I made it super dangerous.
That's awesome. I don't know why, but I just remember reading and I've often wondered about like doing that. Like, oh wow, you're in hyperspace and the energy gets sucked out. You know, it's like sometimes it's referred to as the speed of plot. Traveling from one place to another. But I like the idea that even it's, do we want to take a very long time traveling through natural space, even though we are traveling at, sublight speeds, or do we want to take this wormhole that's dangerous to pilot through? There was an old book, I cannot remember the name of it, written by C.S. Friedman, and the starships could only be piloted by people who had various types of psychoses, because their minds could, what we considered someone to be having their mental faculties not being, air quotes, normal, actually helped them pilot ships through fourth and fifth dimensional spaces, because their minds were fractured and could accept all of this input at the same time. And there was a big plot. There was this one girl that had multiple personalities, and it was this one young lady had multiple personalities, and she was an expert pilot, or rather, on paper she was an expert pilot, but she didn't know it. But this corporation wanted her, and then they were trying to duplicate the same effect by forcing people into. It was this really crazy thing, but I love the idea of, sorry, tangent.
Yeah, it's similar to Andromeda. Did you see this series? There was the slipstream engine, I think it's called, can only be used by humans, because I think they assumed that the neural pathways of humans are similar to the slipstream network. So you could only fly through the slipstream if you're a human. Robots or androids or whatever can't do it.
That's
I think there was one alien character who was also not able to do it, and this was a huge mystery why she wasn't able to do.
I didn't remember that film. I watched the show. Yeah, that's
I
right.
think it was a plot line pretty early on, a couple first episodes or something.
Such a sad show to go away, simply because I think it was the wrong time for it.
I also took huge inspiration for Astrositas from the Andromeda ship. Even though it would be hugely OP in my system. It would have multiple different cores and whatever, but yeah, it's cool. I like the idea. I also had the idea of having mechs on the outer hill of the ship which shoot stuff from there. They had these mechs which walked around on the hull of the Andromeda and shoot down enemies. And I also made some abilities which produce mechs which can walk on the surface of your spaceship.
Oh, Christy says, "What is OP? Overpowered."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just shorthand for, overpowered. Something that, and usually 95% of the time it refers to one player character being overpowered versus another player character.
Yeah.
And then the other 5% is the game master not being able to offer an intriguing encounter because one player may have an easier method of dealing with it, but the other player characters have a tremendous difficulty dealing with it, and just trying to balance that out.
It's also used in a lot of computer games where it's simply one ability or class or whatever is just too strong compared to all the others. That's what you use OP for. Sorry to using these terms. I try to use not the specific terms, but sometimes I can't help it. It's just much easier to shortcut some things.
Well,
my apology.
Christy Van says, "Danke schön, mein Herr." I brutally ripped that apart.
Danke schön, mein Herr.
So she says, "Thank you." So you are perfectly fine, man. Perfectly fine. There's so it's weird to say this because like I like the cipher system. I understand that. Oh, Red Dice says, "I think it's called This Alien Shore." That is the book. She writes thick books. C.S. Friedman. Anyway, the book I'm thinking of. But and it's been a while since I've read it. But I like, the cipher system actually has quite a simple mechanic. And I wonder, part of me wonders why it hasn't caught on more. Which it could be that the simple mechanic might be a turn off to some people, and of course
I think the main reason actually is that the Numenera setting itself is for a very specific audience. It's not D&D where you're just running around killing monsters with your swords. It's a weird fantasy science fiction mixture which is played in the future but also not really. It doesn't really feel like the future, and it's for a very specific audience, and there's not really another huge setting in the cipher system which could push it similarly to D&D. There are some attempts to do that, but I didn't think that anyone has caught on quite as Numenera. There is this weird Stargate-like thing where you switch between the specific realities, and there's one with Primal, which that's something with the strange, exactly. Exactly. That's the dimension hopping thing. Then you have one for gods where you play gods, and one for playing in a dinosaur setting where every character has a pet dinosaur with him, and there are some cool ideas in there, but there isn't one which is massively successful as something like D&D would be. Also, I think the system itself is a bit too abstract for a lot of people. I'm not sure. This point system with the different pools is something you have to first wrap your head around. And you
Yeah.
have to do a lot of work yourself, especially in Numenera, where you simply get a shit ton of plot hooks, but you have to make something out of it yourself, mostly. While other settings have built-in stuff you can just use as written, but here you have to do a lot of work yourself. I liked it, but there are a lot of people who don't like it, I assume. So, yeah.
I'm even plenty of people that I know that love the Numenera world and the Cypher system have stated that it to describe something to the play, it's so chaotic and freeform that describing anything and everything to the players, you have to start at square one. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons is more like, okay, we're starting with the foundation of medieval society, and then we move on from there. Numenera is like it's hey, it's high tech, but it's not, and it's nanotech, but it's not, and it's
yeah. That's also you could make a character which just assumes it's all magic, and he wouldn't be wrong in its own way because any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I think that's the quote.
Yep. So yeah, I get it. I get it. But what a great building block tool for you.
Absolutely. I also thought about making a similar system for Max just because I can.
not too much of a jump from what you've already created. I mean,
no, not really.
Wow. I think the Starships and mech idea just by itself is a great selling point. Like I think that would just all you would need is just some great art to make it pop, and people would just jump straight into it.
That's the thing. I have a couple of people who have read it, really liked it, but it's really hard to get people to read like 200 pages. So you have to have some hooks to get them started to it. I also tried to make it from the production quality point of view, similarly to what Monte Cook Games already made. So I tried to imitate the volume of stuff they wrote and what aspects they put in there and whatever and all this stuff. So I try to make it as close to a real product as I possibly can.
Okay. Brain's moving 1,000 miles a minute.
Okay. I know the feeling.
Yeah. Christy says Rollenspiel?
Rollenspiel. That's role-playing in German.
Okay. I'm learning something all the time. So with your setting, the Astrositas, have you thought about because you're adding in starships and such, have you thought about what's the way to say it? Players settling down in one place with their starship, almost as if it's the equivalent of a fantasy castle of sorts?
Yeah, I already had the idea of making a core which is basically like the ship is a city, and settling down somewhere is basically part of the deal. I have made the terraforms for core ship core, which is basically you can build, you can terraform a whole planet. You can dig new rivers, you can transport fluids from one place to another, and you could basically just use the whole campaign to terraform one planet into what you want to have. And I also have one core which is focused on interacting with the Titan stream, which is these Titans which I discussed last time, these mad giants. Just manipulate them into doing stuff for you. They could also build bases for you and stuff. So yes, theoretically you can do that. I have no specific rules for base building, but I'm pretty sure that the new version of Numenera Discovery or whatever has rules for building stations, so you could just plug that in and use it, no problem.
That's awesome. Red Dice says, I think part of the issue with Numenera and huge fantasy settings in general is that people try and include everything and it's too much. I've had more success zooming in on a small area. And I think what you're describing where, for example, like a player characters maybe trying to terraform a planet or something of that nature. I mean, you could go from very gonzo, giant, galactic traveling to maybe trying to bring a new society to life, and the players are basically the top of society, and they're trying to terraform or domesticate a world.
The terraform's tier 6 abilities actually build a habitat.
Oh wow.
So you could it also has rules for making it useful when you try to travel away from it, so they could send stuff from the habitat to your ship. So for example, if they're mining stuff, they could send stuff to you just because you built a habitat for them. So I think it's a good deal. Stuff like that. You could also, I have one of the first cores I made is actually grows jungles, and I mean it. So the first thing the ship can do is has a jungle seed, which you can plant on any space object, and it grows a jungle in a couple of days on this place, and you can actually benefit from having the jungles on specific places on the planet. You get bonuses inside the jungles, and you can extract stuff from there, and you could also just make it your option to grow jungles all over the universe.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Wow. Oh, so I as usual, I'll usually miss the time and stuff. Of course, we're over an hour, and it's the kind of thing that we're going to have to come back to, or come back to similarly over and over again.
Yeah. As I said, I still got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah. So, by the way, guys, if you're in a chat and you see Red Dice Diaries, and you for some reason you have no idea who he is, search for his because I know he cannot put in hyperlinks. So search for his blog, search for his YouTube channel. Great guy, excellent materials thereof. Search for live plays and everything on his YouTube channel.
He has a great campaign, The Rose of Westhaven, which I am part of. So
yes, he says, have either of you guys read Stars Without Number? Currently rereading the Deluxe Edition. Oh man.
Oh yes, wow. I did read it. I did also started reading the second edition of it. I also GM'd a couple of sessions for it, and I made a sector of myself. So yeah, I did a bit of Stars Without Number.
Wow. In very very generally, what is the mechanic and what's the setting for
Stars Without Number? The mechanics is basic D&D, so it's very simple. So the really old D&D parts just into space. You have very few classes, and the setting is basically the humanity discovered space travel, but then some big event happened, and they got severed from their portals, which leads to different sectors. And so they are each sector is basically developed by humans, but it's cut off from each other. So each sector is basically their own whole world, and each sector is individual. So you can build your own sector with the rules of the system. And the interesting part about this is that it's focused on sandboxing. So you have a system which you can do as a GM faction turns, where you can build different factions in your sector and simulate what they do in a specific time frame to have a background for building your quests or making your world seem alive. And it's really a much work. You have to do like 1 hour for each month as a GM alone, so roundabout. But you can really try to make galactic news out of it, or using that as quest drop lines or whatever. For example, if one planet is attacked by another faction, then you can try to support them or try to save refugees from there or whatever. And it's a really great system for sandboxing. I really love it.
Cool. Might have to pick that up. I love
it's free, completely free. The first and the second edition, the basic rules are complete free.
Oh really?
Yeah. Only the supplements is cost anything. That's the model he tried to do. That a lot of people can get into it, but if you want to support him, you buy the additional products.
Okay, all right. I think Fate did the same thing. Savage Worlds, something similar, where the rules they weren't free, but they were cheap, to get into it, and then the supplements you pay for the supplements and such. Oh, okay.
He
Sweet.
also has rules for mechs, which you can buy extra if you buy the premium version, and spaceship rules and whatever. It's a pretty cool system he made there.
Not too bad. So anyway, we've come to the end. I help plug up Red Dice, great guy who helped me along in my journey on YouTube and creating supplements and things with Critical Hit. But for yourself, what is the give us anything you would like to talk about in the future, or plug now, or your social media, or what have you?
Talk about in the future. I want to talk more about Astrositas, to be honest. That's always the thing, because we only scratched the surface here. I didn't even got to describe any specific parts of my game. I just made it talk generally about everything. But I also am currently trying to build a new system, a completely new system, which is a deck building shaman game, RPG, by the way, a deck building RPG, and I try to make it work. And it would be pretty awesome to talk with someone who also designs games or play material about this game, and what maybe could work and what maybe couldn't. I didn't test it yet. I just tried to make some stuff for it just to get it started somewhere. That would be also awesome to talk about. So yeah, that's that.
I love talking about this stuff anyway, but we kind of had to have an overview to get a foundation. You know,
that's the problem. It's just too massive just to not talk about the general stuff first. So I think it was pretty productive. So
sweet, and I hope it helps you out in terms of like, oh, I know what I have, but I can not simplify, but to reduce this one thing down and kind of thing. Oh, yeah, he said, Christy says, who's DBJ talking to, as well as your YouTube channel? Yes, sir. And do you have
as well as YouTube channel?
You.
Oh, I was a bit confused about the wording. Sorry. I have a YouTube channel, but the problem is most of the videos on my channel are German, so I'm not sure if there are a lot of people who are really interested in that currently. Maybe I'm making one in English too, but let's see.
Check out the doobly-doo. All right, Matt Colville.
Yeah,
he always says, just go to the doobly-doo.
I know. I'm watching his videos too.
Yeah, me too.
It's a cool word.
I think you spelled it absolutely correctly there, Scott Poe. The doobly-doo.
Doobly-doo.
Yep. No, I know what he's talking about down below in the comments.
Yeah, the descriptions and
because in the chat you can't post any hyperlinks or anything, but you can in the comment section, unless it gets every once in a while it gets pushed into spam and I have to unblock it or something.
It's really weird sometimes, but okay, what can you do?
Christy says she says I understand some German, so yeah, I don't have a problem putting it out there. I understand.
If you want, be my guest. but it's normal spoken German. It's not like the stuff you learn in school where you talk really slowly and really clearly. That's the problem always with the stuff. I always sometimes have problems understanding English if someone is talking really fast or really not really clear. It's sometimes with the movies I have really big problems if there are specific actors or whatever.
Yeah. Oh well. So we will get together again. Talk about Astrositas, and because I like to pronounce it that way. And
it's absolutely fine. I like it how you pronounce it.
I just imagine Astrositas.
Astrositas.
Astrositas. I love that. So anyway,
Senoritas.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys everyone in chat and everything, you guys know that I do this like Monday through Friday. I will be having family in next week, so there's probably a good chance I won't be able to go live because I'll probably wake them up. But then on the other hand, most of them will be dead asleep, so I can go on live. My computer is sitting in my my movie room. One day I'll have to like give you guys a little bit of a tour. But yeah, it's a social collection area. So I'm not in like a separate area of the house. I'm actually in the place where we watch movies and, you know, eat food and, you know, socialize.
You practice your sign language a bit.
Yeah. See, and if I've got my headphones on, they can't hear anything, but they just hear me going, yeah, and another thing. And they're like, what the hell is he talking about? You know? But that being said, I will be doing some videos. I've got some reviews that I've got backlogged because there's some things I want to show you guys. Like I've got this, I've got to do it again, but I had this video going where I was showing people what Sirenscape is about, and just doing it live. I think Sirenscape and things like that, like audio and video, I think is going to be, I hope, starts to revolutionize role playing. There are plenty of tools out there that are helping us, like what we're doing now, live chats and talking around the world live and things for free, basically. But I would love to have far more tools that are customizable for all of us, or are of a simple nature that we can put together, whether it's like electronic miniatures, like, hey, I want to have a troll, but he's blue and he's got a helmet on or something, and I can just go click, 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 boom, and create it and just, you know, show it to everyone and things like that. So anyway, so there will be some videos. So although I will be releasing them in the mornings, I won't be live. There's a possibility I won't be live. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. But if I can go live, I will. So I'm just apologizing up front. And the last thing is the D6th and the D20th of each month, we do have an adventure release. They're like $1 a piece. They're like 3 or 4 page adventures that have where each section of the adventure has options in it. So you can mix and match them as you will.
Oh, I gotta write one of these.
Yeah. So there's go ahead.
By the way, Red Dice Diaries said you could hit him up for future talks.
Yeah. Christy says, enjoy family time. That will be your guest YouTubers. Not willingly.
Would also be interesting.
Yeah. Here's my my father-in-law while he sleeps. I'd be able to do that once. It would be fun once.
But not for him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. So, sir, you have a very good day. Everyone else in the chat, thanks for joining in. Red Dice, have fun getting soaking wet. You guys, thank you very much. Christy, if you decide to check out Vince's channel and maybe practice some of your German, that'd be awesome. I am barely literate in one language, let alone multiple ones. So
yeah, you can also always ask me if you don't understand something, but could take a while though. I have one English video where I explain the dark eye, but that's it.
Yeah. Let's not go down that dark path.
Yeah.
Dark eye. Damn it. Wow. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining in. Monday is a Monster Monday, so whether I go live or I have a pre-recorded video, it'll be up 6 o'clock in the morning as usual with all the rest of the videos. So thank you guys, everybody. Have a very great day and have a great weekend.